Welcome to assignment number 1 in module 1, where we're looking more closely and doing sort of tracking of major key concepts from that reading. Now, when you initially access chapter 1 of the OER entitled Our Lives in Ethnic Studies Primer, Chapter 1 is entitled The Significance of Ethnic Studies. You'll see a list of 34 terms. From those 34 terms, I have selected, I think it's 10 major key terms. That's the focus of this video bulb or play pause it bulb, or eventually I'll just call it bulb. And you're going to be quizzed over those major key concepts. You have to get all of those quiz answers correct to get the full score credit. This slide deck is comprised of roughly 35 slides where we look at the other key terms rather quickly, with the opportunity for you to pause the play pause it bulb video and take notes, to use the notes taking function in the bulb. That is not graded, but it is encouraged that you do take some notes. Take notes on the remaining key terms that really catch your eye. Maybe not all of them, but I expect to see some work beyond the major key term quiz questions. All right, here we go. We're going to pause for the cause here and give you an opportunity to access the notes function and play pause it. So just play around in the upper left-hand corner, see if you can access the notes, and just take some notes about double consciousness. What do you remember about double consciousness? Now, specifically, the definition of double consciousness, it's a concept introduced by W.E.B. Du Bois, describing the inner conflict of marginalized groups, particularly as they're forced in many ways to see themselves through the eyes of the quote unquote dominant society. A supporting quote from Du Bois, 1903, described people looking through the eyes of others to measure social place or position as double consciousness. W.E.B. Du Bois introduced double consciousness to describe the experience of internal conflict for marginalized people who must navigate both their own identity and the dominant society's view of them. So what does the concept of double consciousness describe? Next major key term or major key concept, ethnocentrism. Definition: cultural identity based on ancestry, heritage, language, and custom, but used to look at and judge other people's ancestry, heritage, language, and customs. So is it good or bad to be ethnocentric? A supporting quote. Ethnicity describes shared culture as group practices, values, and beliefs recognized by people in the group itself. Ethnicity is part of ethnocentrism. Ethnicity refers to shared cultural heritage, language, traditions, and ancestry, distinct from the physical classifications associated with race, So what does ethnicity primarily refer to? And think back, look at the slide. Oh, I skipped ahead. So ethnicity is what we're on, the major key concept, not ethnocentrism. Pardon, beg pardon. Ethnicity primarily refers to what? Now we're moving on to ethnocentrism. I got a little ahead of myself. Ethnocentrism is about judging other cultures by the standards of one's own culture, often leading to division. A quote from The Significance of Ethnic Studies, quote, "People everywhere think their culture is true, moral, proper, and right," end quote. Ethnocentrism is the belief in the superiority of one's own culture. It can lead to prejudice, discrimination, and misunderstanding between cultural groups. So think about it. Of the options you'll be presented with in this quiz question, which best describes ethnocentrism? Next major key concept, intersectionality. Definition: the overlapping and interconnected nature of social categorizations and oppressions. Quote, "The intersectionality of social categorizations creates overlapping and interdependent systems of oppression," end quote. Intersectionality explains how multiple forms of identity, like race, gender, class, etc., overlap and affect a person's experience with systemic oppression and even with systemic privilege. What does intersectionality help you understand about yourself? Next major key term or key concept, pluralism. Definition: a model where diverse cultural groups maintain their distinctiveness while coexisting equally in society. Quote from the reading: pluralism is a mixture of cultures where each retains its own identity, end quote. Pluralism refers to a society where multiple cultural groups coexist, retain their unique traditions, and ideally are treated equitably. So does pluralism actually exist in America? And pluralism is often heard as religious pluralism more than it is thought of as cultural pluralism. Remember that. Race, big major key concept. Definition: race is a socially constructed classification of people based on perceived physical differences. Supporting quote to understand race a little more deeply: race is truly an arbitrary label that has become part of society's culture with no justifiable evidence, end quote. Race is a socially constructed category based on perceived physical differences and is often used to justify unequal treatment. It is not based on scientific or biological fact. Racial disparities and inequality. Definition of that major key concept: racial disparities and inequality is measurable gaps between racial groups in terms of income, education, health, and other areas. Think about this quote. Data and factual information are critically important to helping us make connections that lead to insights and improvements, end quote. Racial disparity refers to measurable differences in social outcomes, including education, income, health, etc., between racial groups caused by systemic inequalities. And I've recently heard somewhere that the most recent past census has been tampered with now to increase, quote unquote, the number of white United States of America citizens and decrease the number of mixed race and or other identifiers. And who would that serve if in fact that's the truth? And who would that hurt if in fact that's the truth? All right, racial formation, another major key concept from the reading Significance of Ethnic Studies. Definition. Racial formation is the socio-historical process through which racial categories are created, inhabited, transformed, and even destroyed. Think about this quote. The social process of recognizing and defining racial characteristics, labels, and groups is known as racial formation, end quote. Racial formation theory, so it's a major key concept that's a theory. Racial formation theory examines how institutions, laws, and history construct and change racial categories over time. So maybe racial formation theory could be applied to that possibility, potentiality, probability of the latest census being tampered with. Major key concept, systemic racism. Definition. Racism embedded within institutions, racism embedded within practices, racism embedded within cultural norms. Quote, systemic racism in our institutions, by its very definition, creates and maintains racial oppression, end quote. Think about the fact that systemic racism involves policies and institutional practices that produce racial inequalities, even when, and probably most especially when, not explicitly racist in intent. Though we could have a good argument about intention and racism. We certainly could. All righty, so now we've moved into just the key concepts. We're out of the quote unquote major key concepts. We're into just key concepts. So these are the areas where I want you to stop, pause the video, and use the note-taking function in your bulb. So think about achieved status and ascribed status. Definition. Social position that a person attains through their own efforts. Social status that was assigned to someone at birth and is not chosen by them. How could those terms be helpful in your assignment to PowerPoint? Or maybe not useful, okay? Take a few notes. Again, just a key term, competition. The struggle between groups for resources, often leading to social stratification and inequality. Think about this quote as it relates to competition. A competitive environment provides the opportunity for one group to benefit from the subordination of another. Have you witnessed that, experienced that? Do you understand that? How does that apply to you? Does it? Moving along. Key concept to play with in the background, perhaps somewhere. Dominant group. Definition. The group in society with the most power, the most privileges, and the most influence over norms and values. What does this quote mean to you? The dominant group in the United States is represented by white, middle-class, Protestant people of Northern European descent. All right, next slide. Key term only. Egocentric. Definition: a way of thinking centered on oneself, often ignoring others' needs or perspectives. Here's a supporting quote. Egocentric thinking legitimizes prejudice. It legitimizes self-justification. It legitimizes self-deception driven by ideas like I'm right or I deserve it. That one's pretty deep. That can certainly go beyond ethnicity and race, issues revolving around ethnicity and race. It's highly, deeply philosophical, but is it a word you'd want to play with? If so, how would you? Okay. All right. Fluid competitive race relations. Woo. Big key concept, not major for right now, just a key concept. The definition of fluid competitive race relations is race relations where members are judged on skills, but still affected by historic inequality. Listen to this quote. Groups live separately, primarily among their own racial groups. Competition and racial group conflicts increase when fewer resources are available. What does that make you think about? All righty. So quickly, several more to go here. Just look through. I want you to go through each remaining slide. Look at the key term, not a major key term, but the key term. Look at the definition and look at the supporting quote. I'm going to give it, I don't know, a few 30 or so seconds per slide here. And I want you to use your note-taking function to stop and take notes, particularly for the terms, just the basic key terms here that really stand out to you for some reason, even if you're not sure why they stand out to you. But take notes about what you're feeling when you see these words and read these definitions. Your feelings are important. Your feelings inform your thoughts. Feelings actually happen in the body before the cognitive process of brain thinking, head brain thinking occurs. So what you feel about something packs a whole lot of truth, and I want you to begin to trust what you feel and describe what you feel and write that down, both what you feel and then what you think as you're seeing these remaining key terms. It's going to take about 30 seconds per term. Got quite a few to go. If you're not sure that you could just, note taking is just about pausing the video and using the notes taking function. If you're a little bit lost, go back to your orientation module about play posit bulbs. Watch that short video again to see how to stop to take notes. I will see what notes you've taken on my end. The notes are not graded, only the quiz questions that you've already now gotten through But I will be taking notes myself on who is and who is not taking notes for several reasons, not to penalize you, but just to see what kind of work you're doing. When I see that you're doing work, or what we call rigor, then I can have a little more faith in your journey. When I see that you're not taking any notes, then I have to question. And that leads to a whole other road, and I have to follow up, and I have to be sure that you are learning something. So take notes. Let me see what you're learning, what you're processing. And so again, you're focusing primarily on the major terms, major key concepts, major key terms, and perhaps some of the remaining key terms. And in particular, you're doing so in an effort to use introductory ethnic studies terms in assignment number 2 in this module, module number 1.